Good afternoon and welcome to the Detroit Regional Chamber's CannaBusiness. I'm Tammy Carnwright. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Chamber. Today's CannaBusiness will focus on finding funding in the complex legal and financial landscape of the cannabis industry. I need to give a special shout out and thank you to Plunkett Cooney for their support and ongoing sponsorship of CannaBusiness. I do encourage you to visit detroitchamber.com/CannaBusiness. That's where you'll find a lot more resources available related to the industry of cannabis, but it's also a place where you can find out about any other upcoming programs. So today I have the privilege of speaking with a fantastic panel to discuss funding in the cannabis industry. Jeffrey Schroeder is a partner at the Plunkett Cooney's Bloomfield Hills office, and he serves as the co-leader of Plunkett Cooney's Cannabis and Healthcare industry groups. Susan Cavallo is a commercial relationship specialist at Public Service Credit Union, serving businesses focused on the cannabis industry. And finally, joining us today from warm California is Jennifer Lujan, Senior Director of Social Impact for Ease, a cannabis company with California and Michigan operations. So at this time, I want to start our presentation, and I'm pleased to turn it over to Jeff Schroeder, healthcare and governmental law attorney for Plunkett Cooney, specializing in the cannabis industry, and he's going to share an update on the legal framework and funding options for business. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the Detroit Regional Chamber on behalf of Plunkett Cooney for this opportunity to present today. I do have some good news to start this presentation, and that is that I'm on a time limit. So we will be going till about 1:20 when we will turn it over to the panel for a full, robust discussion on this issue. Certainly, these are challenging times for everybody, including Plunkett Cooney, and I hope everyone is doing safe and well. And this current situation with the pandemic has affected so many industries and businesses. But in spite of that, I can report that the cannabis industry in Michigan is booming. In fact, the numbers were just released this week. In calendar year 2021, total cannabis sales in the state of Michigan, regulated cannabis sales, was $1.7 billion. And Michigan has now exceeded $3 billion in cannabis sales since the beginning of the regulated cannabis market. In 2021, 73% of those sales were for the adult use market as opposed to the medical market. I do want to give a shout out to the Marijuana Regulatory Agency for quickly adapting to the pandemic. And a lot of times in these discussions, we gripe about laws and regulations and how they kind of get in the way of commerce. But in this particular case, the MRA acted quickly in March of 2020 and adapted and allowed for curbside sales. They have a highly regulated but effective home delivery program. This was to keep people out of crowded rooms inside of cannabis dispensaries. And I think it's been very effective. And the projections are next year that we're going to far exceed 1.7 billion in sales. So with that, obviously there's a lot of opportunity. And as it was stated, I'm the co-leader of the Cannabis Industry Practice Group at Plunkett Cooney. And what we do is we assist our clients with licensing and regulation, getting your state license, your local license, municipal approvals, business law, contracts, litigation. And we have quite a bit of lawyers who never thought they would ever be involved in cannabis, applying their skills as litigators and business attorneys to help another legitimate business establish and grow here in Michigan. We started with legalized cannabis in 2016 in Michigan with the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. And it's been a challenge since the beginning for the entrepreneurs in this space to find their funding. And that's what we're talking about today, is finding your funding. How do you find funding for a business that is considered to be a felony by the federal government. And when our financial institutions are heavily regulated by the federal government. So that's the problem we have. And we have very creative solutions that are in place, and we have some reforms on the horizon that are going to greatly assist with that. First of all, the basic problem with federal law is our Controlled Substances Act, which classifies marijuana or cannabis as a Schedule I drug. A Schedule I drug is considered to be a substance that has no accepted medical use and has a high potential for abuse. It's in the same category as heroin, LSD, ecstasy, magic mushrooms, and psychedelic fungi, although Detroit and Ann Arbor just decriminalized mushrooms and psychedelic fungi. I was thinking of creating the fungi industry group that I could lead up at the law firm, but it would be fun guy, get it? Guys and gals, actually, we have quite a diverse group here. So I am going to prank our CEO on April Fool's Day this year with a request to open up the fungi and fungal group. So don't tell him that. Anyway, the traditional forms of banking and financing aren't available to this industry because cannabis is considered like heroin and other dangerous drugs. But the federal system hasn't caught up with a majority of the states which have some form of legalization and licensed sales and use of cannabis, both medical and recreational. So when we first started out in 2016, assisting clients in getting licenses, our clients were paying cash. We are one of the oldest and largest law firms in the Midwest, been around over 113 years, and we went right back to our roots. When we started in just taking cash from our paying clients, but we had to go through a very, very robust process with our CPA firm to document where this cash came from, document how we received it, document how it got to the bank and who did it. There's IRS forms involved, there's reporting involved, and it was very difficult. In fact, I had the fun project of going on Amazon to buy a cash counter. One of those machines that counts the cash. When clients had to come, we had a procedure where clients had to come to this office to pay their legal bills. We had to have witnesses fill out the forms. That's very difficult. It's hard for somebody to leave their business for several hours. It's hard for us to come down and do this. Nobody really wanted to do it. And thankfully, there are now banking solutions for cannabis businesses in Michigan. In the last year or two, we've rarely had to have someone pay in cash because of these very creative solutions that are now available for cannabis businesses in Michigan. But still, traditional banking is not available. Try to go to a dispensary and pay on your credit card. Okay, so there's still a lot to be done there. The banking solutions that we have now, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that during the panel discussion, involve a lot of due diligence and work on behalf of the financial institution and on behalf of the business that's seeking to do banking there. And we'll get into that. But there is a federal update that I am giving as the program states. And first of all, the main question people ask when they come to see me, I've had a lot of entrepreneurs come and say, I've been successful in a business. I want to expand this business. I want to bring my family members into this business. I think it's a great opportunity, but I've worked hard for what I've earned my whole life, and I don't want that at risk. I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to be questioned by federal authorities. I don't want my name tarnished. I don't want my other businesses tarnished by this. I'm very concerned. What can you tell me to give me some comfort that if I enter this business that I'm not going to end up in a federal prison or under investigation? And even more so with the licensing in the state of Michigan, spouses have to fill out applications as well. So I've had to sit with spouses and explain this. And there are a number of safe harbors that exist, and I tell this to my clients. The first one is that the United States Congress has adopted a safe harbor for those businesses that operate legally in a state under a state law where there's licenses or permits to do both medical and adult use sales of growing, sales, and manufacture of cannabis. As you know, in the Constitution, Congress has the power of the purse, and Congress funds the Department of Justice every year, including the FBI and local U.S. attorney. And they have in their appropriations bills that fund that department tied strings to those funds and told them, you cannot prosecute individuals or businesses in states that are operating legally under their state law licensing system for cannabis. And I think that's huge. I mean, it's what we call a safe harbor. It's not permanent. Every year, Congress has to go through the appropriations process, and things could change. And it's also a limited safe harbor. Someone could make an allegation that you're doing something that's outside the scope of your state license, and suddenly the feds could be investigating you for something that maybe was a misunderstanding or something that's maybe a regulatory violation. So there's still a threat there. The reality is that the federal government has limited resources. The immediate ex-U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, Matthew Schroeder, stated publicly that it wasn't a priority for his office to do this. And Matthew's a friend of mine. I used to work with him at the Michigan Attorney General's office, but that's just a little bit of comfort when they say it's not a priority. I think people, when they invest their life savings or start a new business, they want to know that they have more protection than that. So we also have right now the Safe Banking Act, which is pending. So that's a year-to-year basis, the appropriations process. The funds the government gives to Department of Justice is year by year. They have to renew this provision. With the Safe Banking Act, it has been passed 5 times by the United States House of Representatives. The Safe Banking Act would give protections to our financial institutions to allow them to do all the traditional banking and finance services to the cannabis industry and consumers without a threat of being investigated or prosecuted. So for example, under the current laws, theoretically, if a financial institution provided banking services to a cannabis business and they were using that business for some other money laundering scheme or other illegal scheme, then the bank potentially has liability there. And this Safe Banking Act would remove a lot of that potential liability for the banks and allow the financial institution system to service all these traditional banking services. And as I said, the Safe Banking Act has passed 5 times, and most recently in September of 2021. And it had a lot of support from Republicans and Democrats, bipartisan support, and it just can't get through the Senate. Now, maybe you've heard that before, but the Safe Banking Act can't get through the Senate. And there's a couple reasons why. The Senate tends to move slower than the House, as we know, but there are some ultra conservatives who do not want to open the door to further legalization of marijuana. But there are also others on the other side of the spectrum. They feel that the Safe Banking Act is sort of a half measure, and it doesn't address the real problem and the real issue, which is the federal prohibition on cannabis. They're preferring to hold out to have a comprehensive solution to the federal problem, which would be to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level, not take it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, but decriminalize cannabis at the federal level. And if that happened, we wouldn't need a Safe Banking Act. So there are some that are holding out for greater reform because they feel if we pass the Safe Banking Act, then it's going to be another several years or longer before we get to the heart of the issue, heart of the matter, which is the federal prohibition. There is a bill that recently passed out of committee in the House of Representatives. I think this probably has less of a chance of getting through the Senate than the Safe Banking Act, clearly. It's called the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. It's called MORE, M-O-R-E. It would remove the federal prohibition on cannabis. It would assist with expungement of crimes related to marijuana. It would create a federal tax. That one is very controversial, and create social equity programs as well. I think the issue there is what will happen if we get to that point? The Safe Banking Act is one thing. Federal legalization could open the door to interstate commerce. And if we had interstate commerce, that means a grower in Michigan could sell their product to, a dispensary out of state. There could be wholesale sales of marijuana across state lines. And what's that going to do? Because right now here in Michigan, we have a growing industry that supports a lot of, let's call them local farmers. We have a lot of small growers in Michigan, craft growers. They have 500 plants, 1,000 plants, and they can only sell in Michigan. That's the restriction of your Michigan license. It's its own market. You cannot bring this stuff across state lines. You can't, none of that's allowed. So that would open the door to that. But what would that do to these small growers in Michigan who have invested a lot of money and have a lot of clientele here in Michigan? Would it open the door to multi-million square foot massive grow facilities somewhere in the country that would maybe hurt these small and mid-sized growers that have been established in all these states, and as well as sort of the retail market with dispensaries, with the branding that's going on? There's been an explosion of licensing and branding, and we would see that start to occur. So I think the comprehensive cannabis reform is a little farther in the future, but I mean, that's the heart of the matter. And with the Safe Banking Act, we have to find a way to get it through the Senate. So I wanted to see where our Michigan senators stood on this, because it's passed the House, and how do we get it through the Senate? So we have Senator Gary Peters and Senator Debbie Stabenow. Senator Peters has signed on to support the Safe Banking Act. I could not find where Senator Stabenow has, although I haven't seen that she's opposed to it either. So if we're concerned about that, we might want to call Senator Stabenow this afternoon or send her an email and see if her staff can see where she stands on this. And we might be able to have that. And I think we're talking about finding our funding, and non-traditional sources of funding are being pursued by most of the operators. You have a lot of partners coming together, a lot of entrepreneurs forming partnerships and bringing investment capital to these cannabis businesses in Michigan. You also have the ability to create a holding company that owns the real estate and the property and the equipment. And if you own real estate, you own property and equipment, but you don't own the marijuana, you don't grow it, you can own that and lease it to the company that actually grows the product, sells the product, touches the product, manufactures the product. So there are some financing options available for those that are just in the business of owning the real estate and the equipment and leasing it. You could also own the real estate, the equipment in the building, and own your licensed cannabis business through another entity. And we see a lot of those closely held relationships in this business now. But moving into the future, where do you get a loan? Most businesses, when they want to start new construction or expand, they get a loan, and that's really not available right now. And I think that's the issue we want to discuss a little bit more about today. So I hope I've given a good background for everybody to start this conversation. And again, thank you to the Detroit Regional Chamber for this opportunity, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Jeff, thank you so much for your presentation and laying out the foundation for our conversation. So now that we understand why federal legislation is so important and the challenges around financing and banking, let's get into discussing what business can do from a funding perspective. So, excuse me. Susan, let me start with you. You've indicated that you work to find workarounds for cannabis businesses facing restricted fund challenges on the conservative side. So can you talk about that? And if you'd like up front first, make an introduction of yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tammy. Yes, my name is Susan Cobello. I'm with Public Service Credit Union, Commercial Relationship Specialist. We are in the cannabis banking business. Happy to provide support in any way that we can. The credit union itself, we've been around since 1952, so we are a full service credit union. As far as the funding for cannabis businesses, as Jeff mentioned, cannabis remains Schedule I controlled substance on a federal level, which makes it, almost impossible to get loans from major banks and financial institutions. Businesses need to focus on private lenders who consist of individuals, hedge funds, family offices, asset-based lenders, and non-bank lenders who may be hard to find. And then the terms, given by cannabis lenders are more expensive and may look less attractive, of course, than traditional funding and business lending because of the additional legal risk present and the imbalance between the demand for funding and available capital. If only in a best case scenario, the Safe Banking Act were to be passed, financial institutions would be in a much better position to lend and do business with cannabis businesses. As Jeff mentioned again, if a real estate loan is needed, a workaround may be that lenders lend to a real estate holding company who then leases the space back to the business. There are merchant cash advance loans available online, which is usually a quick turnaround, but have high fees, short repayment terms, and may stress your cash flow. Please keep in mind that there is funding available here at Public Service Credit Union. We do lend to cannabis businesses, although we are forced to be on the conservative side. We also have resources that we can connect you to. I have a loan broker that I recently found in Ann Arbor who started lending to cannabis businesses about a year ago. He provided me with a lot of information. He works with 100 lenders to help cannabis businesses find funding. He said that most people are into cultivation and growing right now, needing funds for construction, real estate, renovations, and working capital. Just some tips before speaking with a lender. I know that you're probably all pretty experienced, but before speaking with a lender, you may want to be prepared. Be sure that you understand the cost of the total project from start to finish and the amount of cash flow you will have available before business becomes profitable. Many of you already know this, but there is some important information that lenders look for in a qualified borrower. The strength of the borrower and or guarantors, the amount of borrower liquidity, existing equity and collateral. Borrowers must bring a significant amount to the table. Lenders usually look at 30% plus of the total project. The experience of the team that you're on, the experience of your group needing the lending, being able to clearly articulate the plan and instill confidence that you can execute it. When putting together your business plan, be prepared to speak with the lender. You will want to be as clear and specific as possible. If you need funding for property, for instance, you should explain why this property is the best location and how you found it. If you're needing funding for construction, be sure to know what contractors you plan to work with and why. If you need funding for equipment, be sure to know why you chose that type and brand of equipment. The more experience you have, the better. If you are new to cannabis business, I would suggest that you find someone successful in the business and spend some time with them if possible. Also, if you have a partner with more experience, be sure to let the lenders know that as well. It really helps to invest the time on the front end and be prepared before meeting with the lender. There are many resources available, and I'm happy to connect you to those resources and people who can help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. That's great information. Jennifer, what type of non-traditional funding sources exist for marijuana businesses? And please feel free to introduce yourself and ease before you respond to the question.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. And good to be here today. Thanks for everyone for joining, calling in. So I'm a senior director at Ease. Ease is one of the largest cannabis delivery marketplaces right now in the nation. We pretty much are throughout California, and we are now in Michigan in Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, and Detroit. And then soon to be, we will be in Florida and Colorado as well. So really excited to be expanding. As part of what we do, we are constantly consulting all of our brand partners that are on our menu. We carry hundreds of brands on our menu, and we're constantly consulting them in ways that they can be getting and reaching consumers, really trying to sustain their growth and their success as a cannabis business. And one of the things that we constantly see all the time is that we start to see companies like year one, year two, slowly having a lot of challenges. As it is, all cannabis businesses have a hard time, even ease. And as a small business owner, it's really complicated because of fundraising and being able to sustain your business. And as Jeffrey mentioned, you can't get a traditional loan in the same way that you were if you were, opening up a restaurant or something. So we've looked at different ways on being able to help and sustain a lot of these small businesses, and really looking at the barriers of entry for this industry, specifically for underrepresented entrepreneurs and specifically social equity. So social equity means many different things, depending on what state and municipality you're in. But we do specifically focus on underrepresented, and we created an accelerator specifically for that called Momentum. So Momentum is a cannabis business accelerator that I can dive more into in a bit, but we do provide financial grants. We're not taking equity. These are financial grants that we are giving to a very small group. You have to apply for it, and it is competitive, but it is a nationwide accelerator. But there's also other private companies that are doing the same thing. We've started to see in the past couple years where either a lot of private companies are looking at partnering with different cannabis businesses, either by giving similar grants as we do, or giving very, very low interest loans. And then you also have many, specifically like a lot of other investors who are looking at also funding companies, specifically a lot of social equity investors. So that's really interesting to see that this trend is starting to come up. You don't really see that as much in other industries, but it's really nice to see that companies are really starting to build this out as part of either their social impact or their social equity programs.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Jeff, what legal steps should businesses take when they're working with financial institutions?
Thank you. Legal steps, practical advice would be call Susan or Jennifer. Legal advice is, first of all, you need to get licensed right now. Until we have a complete sort of federal solution to this or a partial federal solution, the current cannabis businesses that want to do banking must be licensed first. I also would recommend during the licensure process to ensure that you have a very robust compliance program, a robust business plan, so that when the bank is reviewing your business, they know that you've got all those checks and balances in place, because the bank is putting its neck on the line. Without the safe harbor law existing at the federal level, there's a lot of due diligence the financial institution has to do to protect itself. And so if you want to do banking in this non-traditional way, then you're going to have all kinds of systems and protections in place that it's going to satisfy the bank. So those are the initial steps I would take. I also would recommend that you're upfront with your bankers. Don't walk into the local bank branch and tell them you're starting a new farming agriculture business and beat around the bush about what you're really trying to do. It's not going to work anyway. All the bankers all in Michigan are onto it. So in reality, it's all about compliance and due diligence and making sure you have the right systems in place to track every penny in and out, and making sure your staff is trained, so the regulators aren't coming in and finding violations. Those are the kind of things that are going to make the bank nervous. So those are the legal steps I would take and I would recommend.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Susan, can you talk about what other services are that you provide to support marijuana businesses? I know we had quite a chat about this, and I was impressed with the other services.
Sure. Thanks so much, Tammy. Yes, of course, we have the business and checking accounts as well. We have payroll services. We also have banking for employees of cannabis businesses. I know sometimes it's challenging being an employee and trying to get a loan as far as being a qualified borrower for personal consumer loans. We have cash transport services. Cashless ATMs. We have a partner that we work with. Of course, the online and mobile banking, bill pay. We have domestic wires, things like that. I'm currently working with a merchant services company that I've just been introduced to that works with cannabis businesses. So they have a lot of cannabis businesses that they're actually providing the merchant services to. So I am really happy to connect you to my contact there, and hopefully they can help you as well, because I think that's just the answer to it all. I wish that people could use their debit and credit cards and to be able to purchase. Again, if there's anything else I can ever do to help, let me know.
Thank you. So Jennifer, I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, you mentioned your Momentum program, your Accelerator program. First, let's talk about what are some of the criteria for businesses to apply, and maybe first, what is Momentum? And then let's talk about the criteria, and then I've got a follow-up question.
Yeah. So Momentum is a business accelerator that we started in 2019 that focuses specifically on underrepresented entrepreneurs in the space. So we're looking at, as I mentioned, we started to see a lot of like startups and folks who were starting their businesses, and after 1 year, 2 years, really having to shut their doors because they couldn't really sustain it a lot because of fundraising and capital. So we look at businesses that are already either licensed or in the process of applying for a license, but are beyond concept phase. So they already have a business plan in place. We do look at, basically like what their goals are for their businesses, where they are geographically like located, basically how we can, if there is a way that we can be of service to them. And really through that program, we select 10 businesses across the board. We have people who are manufacturing, ancillary, even hemp. We have distribution, retail. So it kind of covers everything. We have businesses that get in all across the board. And we accept 10 businesses. Each of them receive a $50,000 grant, no equity taken. And then they also get 12 weeks of curriculum taught by industry experts throughout the country. So that 12 weeks is really packed in with education, from legal and compliance to marketing, data and analytics. And then additionally, with the curriculum, they also get paired up with mentors. So they get paired up with Ease mentors, and they have access to all of Ease's business suite of services during those 12 weeks. So they have access to, again, our marketing team, our HR team, and so forth. And then they also get paired up with mentors who are investor mentors to really sort of help them really create what their pitch deck might be, even if they're trying to fundraise or not to fundraise, but really sort of how to sell their business to an external audience. And then we end with a demo day where they get to present to not just investors, but retailers and strategic partners within the EASE ecosystem. So yeah, that's basically what the Momentum program is. We do it every year. So we open applications once a year, and then we have a cohort. We will be announcing our third year cohort in late February. And then we have the program, and then we usually open applications again up in the fall.
So my follow-up question was, what type of services does a company get when they become part of the Momentum Accelerator program? Is that what you just already described?
Yeah, they get, there's so much that they get. I would think that, for a big part, it's a lot of the education. The mentorship is also very key because these are mentors that they will carry on for beyond the program. But also it's just really a lot of the relationships. What we saw to be really beneficial is that we've created now a community. And specifically, we have a community, in California right now. We actually have a community in Michigan, in New York. And we're starting to see that all of these different businesses who have been part or now the alumni are working together and creating strategic partnerships. So it's really exciting. There's now a huge benefit to for these folks, but even for applicants, sometimes we don't necessarily, folks don't get into the program because they might not be right fit. Maybe they're too far along in their business. And too advanced, or maybe they're still trying to figure out what it is that they want to do in the industry. But we still work and try to see if there's any other ways that we can be supportive beyond just the program.
Sounds like a great program. I'm glad you are here with us today to talk about it. So this next question is for all of you, all the panelists. Important today is social impact. As has been mentioned already, what steps should businesses and funders take in relation to social impacting and communities of interest? So Jeff, let me start with you.
This is a very important issue. As Jennifer stated, there are state and local requirements for social equity, and they are different from state to state and municipality to municipality. Here in Michigan, if you want an adult use license, you have to submit a social equity plan as part of your pre-qualification application to the state of Michigan. Many communities, municipalities require that as part of the local license or permit process. It's important because it's about a new industry that's being created and expanded, and ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to get involved. And some tough questions have been asked. I've gone into communities and been asked tough questions by local officials about, well, your client is not from this area. What are you going, you're going to come in here, we're going to give you this valuable license. What are you going to do to get back to the community? And we have to specify that in our applications. And typically it's making a commitment to give job opportunities to local residents, giving back to the community, not just, the turkey giveaway at Thanksgiving, but being part of that community, and also making sure that your business doesn't impact the community in a negative way. That's all fine and good, but what does that do to give individuals that have been disadvantaged in the past, even by marijuana, an opportunity to have equity or ownership in a business or in the system? And that's the tough part. That's the real tough part. But we're constantly working on finding better answers for that. And the locals are holding our feet to the fire on that. And so is the state. And it's very important because cannabis, I think it's undoubtedly cannabis prohibition over the decades has disproportionately affected persons of color and persons of lower income. And now that this is being accepted as a legal product, we have a responsibility as a society to ensure that they're taking part in this and receiving a lot of the benefits, because it's a change in government policy that's allowing this to happen. So I think it's very important. I work with my clients all the time in Detroit. Nicole Milton in Detroit is someone I've worked with. She will literally get on the streets and knock on the doors in the neighborhoods and get the people involved and help us find individuals. She knows the city and local officials. You really need to become part of the community when you're opening one of these facilities. So I could go on, but it's very important. And we prepare social equity plans. We do that by reaching out and getting input from the community and those that need the assistance and would benefit from this.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Susan, I'll repeat the question. What steps should businesses and funders take in relation to social impacting in communities of interest?
Well, I have to echo what Jeff mentioned. I mean, it's very, very important to get involved. I know as Public Service Credit Union, we're really passionate about the communities that we serve and stay involved. But I think what's important to the business themselves is to find their own passion. I mean, what are they passionate about within the community and how they can help? I know of a cannabis business that gives free product to all cancer patients because he's very passionate about that. So he also contributes a lot to the community and programs within the community. But that is something that I think that each business owner or lender might, seek out themselves. I think that's what helps, is when they really find what speaks to them and what they're really passionate about. That's when it's going to make the most difference.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jennifer?
I have a lot to say about this. This is definitely my area where I focus a lot of my attention on. But yeah, I mean, it's, as Jeff mentioned, this is a new legal industry, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes to play, specifically when you look at the harms that the war on drugs did to marginalized communities. And it's unacceptable for us to necessarily just to look at this as a nice to have. It's a need to have. We need to be, if there's so many different pioneers that came into this industry before us, and we need to make sure that we are not just supporting a lot of those people who are transitionally making it from the traditional market into the legal market, and how they can be able to have space and for them to be successful in this industry. But also we have to look at the communities that were impacted as well. So it goes, social equity obviously is extremely important. That's the whole reason of why we created Momentum. And we even have a social equity menu that's specifically just for social equity license holders. If you go to into our platform, you'll see social equity products. And, that's all, again, we're supporting and wanting to support those entrepreneurs on sustained growth and making sure that they're successful. But we're also looking at what are the communities that were harmed by the war on drugs, and how can we best support those, whether that might be education, whether that might be from a health perspective, all of those different things. There's so many amazing organizations right now that are doing a lot of work specifically in the cannabis space that are supporting these communities, but also supporting expungement. So, no one should be in prison right now because they were, had some sort of something on their record because of cannabis. There should not be people that still have to have it on the record and because they had possession of cannabis, and this is impacting them from applying for a job or custody issues or anything like that. So there's Social Impact Center is a really amazing organization that runs national expungement works. You can also, it could be NEW. I would really look at them. They're doing a lot of amazing work at expungement efforts, specifically for cannabis. Last Prisoner Project is another amazing organization that's doing work making sure that folks who are in prison because of cannabis and working to make sure that they get released. There's also Cage-Free Cannabis, another one. Drug Policy Alliance is doing some work as well on the expungement work. And then you just have organizations like Hood Incubator, Cannabis for Black Lives. There's so many that are doing this great work that's specifically all across the country on cannabis policy and regulation, but also and for social equity as well. So lots of different ways that you can get involved. You don't have to necessarily get involved. People ask me all the time, well, is it, I don't have necessarily the funds to be writing big checks, but there's so many other ways. If there's being able to share your skill set, just even bringing awareness and sharing these organizations and the work on, social media, or just even reading and, creating awareness about a lot of these issues and the social impact issues and the responsibility and things that you can do is really the first step.
So I heard mentioned earlier about the importance of having a social impact plan. So if someone who's with us today is still in the process of trying to get started, where can they find an example of a social impact plan?
I'm happy to create or to work with people on what that looks like. I know that there's a lot of folks, and Jeffrey might be able to answer this, around social equity programs and people who are developing what that looks like specifically for Michigan and Detroit. Jeffrey, I don't know, you might have a few things to say about that.
It depends on the community. Social equity means different things in different communities. What Kalamazoo is asking for is different than Detroit. So you first would want to look and see where you are and what that community requires. There's also a state social equity provision, as I mentioned earlier. Also, the state of Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency is now asking all licensees if they're willing to publish their social equity plan, and they're going to be publishing individual facilities plans, those that sign off on it. So I think that there will be no lack of an availability to finding these plans. I'm sure it's something you could even Google and find some samples of, and certainly if anyone contacts my office, I'm more than willing to share some examples.
Okay, thanks. So let's go to, we've got a few questions here in the chat box. One that we can kind of hit quickly. Jeff, what organization is Nicole Milton with?
Well, Nicole Milton, she has her own business, and Alexander Bryce is the name of her business. And I met her 5 or 6 years ago in the hallway of the Wayne County Circuit Court when we were in a legal battle over a dispensary. And she's been a community organizer, a real booster to this industry. She knows everyone in this industry in the Metro Detroit area. She's the hardest working person in the business, I know. She's not afraid to do it. She'll go door to door anywhere and help bring the community together with an applicant. Amazing woman. So, if she's available, she's someone I would definitely connect with. And she started as a community organizer. So.
Okay, thank you. And this might have come out in someone's comments. I can't remember, but a question here is, generally, is it legal to hire returning citizens for cannabis space, or does it depend on the offense?
Yeah, so when I hear returning, it sounds like maybe they were in prison for a while. And there's a general rule that if you had a controlled substance felony on your record, that you can't be an employee. I mean, for the last 10 years, I believe it's the last 10 years, but you can get written permission from the MRA. So if there are circumstances, you can write to the MRA and plead your case and the hardship, and they have the ability to grant an exemption for that. All facilities have to do criminal background checks on their employees. If you want to be an owner, I have clients that have felony marijuana convictions in their past that actually got licensed in their owners of facilities. So it's not a strict prohibition, but if it's in the last 10 years, it's a little harder. But they do have an exemption for employees. You have to get permission. That's Michigan. So I can't speak to other states.
Okay. Has there been any legal decisions or challenges related to business drug policy that does not allow cannabis?
Well, I saw that question. That one always comes up. So there was a court case in Michigan involving drug testing, and it was in a medical marijuana context. So someone had a medical marijuana card. They failed the drug test and they were fired. I think it was the city of Lansing Water Department. Anyway, it was a municipal employer that had a strict cannabis, no cannabis policy. They failed the drug test, and the courts were not sympathetic to the legal challenge there, saying it's a workplace policy. So if they're saying no cannabis, then no cannabis. I know some healthcare institutions are saying no tobacco for their employees. So I don't think that sort of challenge is going to be very successful moving forward. Hopefully, more businesses will not require that. In fact, the marketplace is changing. There's such a demand for jobs for employees now. There's a labor shortage. So I've heard of a lot of employers are dropping that because they need the workers.
Right.
Of course, there's a fine line between if you're testing positive for cannabis in a sample versus, consuming when you're on the job or, that kind of thing. That's a different issue too. So I think the labor market shortage has really helped with that here. But there are certain jobs that I don't think they'll ever, if you need a commercial driver's license, right? And you're driving a semi truck with valuable goods in it along our interstate highway, I don't know that will ever be an option, but we'll see.
Let me first say thank you. Some of our participants are actually popping in there and answering some questions and giving some feedback. So thank you to all of you. One question that came up right up front was about whether or not there were association groups familiar with the cannabis industry. We've got several that were mentioned. The Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, the Cannabis Business Association of Michigan, the Great Lakes Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. Others that any of you could recommend? And also, is there a national trade association?
There's the U.S. Cannabis Council, which is fairly new. And that one is an offshoot of the Marijuana Policy Project. So that's the only national one I know. There's also MCBA. Yes, I think someone's also putting NCIA as well as some other ones.
Okay.
Check out the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association.
Say that again, Jeff.
Michigan Cannabis Industry Association.
Okay, yep, that was in there, I think. Okay. So we've gotten through, I think, everything from our chat room now, and I want to thank everybody who's going on and also adding more information. That's very useful. So we have just a few minutes left. What I'd like to do is give you each an opportunity to add anything that I might not have asked or brought up that you just want to make sure and share before closing. So Susan, let me start with you.
No, I think I was able to cover everything. Again, just happy to help in any way that I can. I think it's a wonderful business. Everybody that I've met throughout the journey is just extraordinary. So happy to be part of it and impressed with everything that you guys do to help others. It's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Jennifer.
Not much here, just thank you all for coming and calling in today. It's a really exciting industry, lots of changes happening all the time. I would say, it's like you could be in this industry for only like a couple years and you're considered a veteran, because so much happens within just a couple of months. So always completely tune in to conversations like this, because it's always changing up.
Jeff?
Yeah, just to add on to the conversation about employer drug testing, I addressed the medical marijuana issue. Also, we have in the chat a comment from a very reputable source reminding us that in the adult use cannabis statute, that the act does not prohibit an employer from disciplining an employee for a violation of a workplace drug policy. So in our adult use statute, gives protections to employers to have workplace drug policies. My answer was with respect to the medical marijuana. The question came from Mr. Dan Wyman. If that's the Dan Wyman, I think I know. Hello, Dan. Thanks for the question. And with the medical marijuana card saying, I have a medical condition, I'm using marijuana for medical purposes. You as my employer can't tell me that I can't take this medicine to treat my condition. I have a right to this under our state laws. And so the courts rejected that. On adult use, forget it. It's right in the statute. You cannot, the workplace drug policies are protected. In conclusion, again, thank you to the Detroit Regional Chamber for this event and allowing Plunkett Cooney to sponsor this. Thank you to my co-presenters, Jennifer Lujan and Susan Cabello. I look forward to seeing you in the future, and the Detroit Regional Chamber as well. And it's been a fun hour. It always goes by fast. And thank you, everybody.
Sure does.
It does. It does. Well, I want to echo Jeff. Thank you all so much for your insights and the great conversation. I think we could continue on quite a bit, but you all have come forward as great resources for the folks who are with us today. And of course, let me tell everyone who's with us today, this will be posted on our website, this session. And so if you know of someone who wasn't able to make it today, and you're sharing with them what you heard and they want to hear it, please, again, go to detroitchamber.com/CannaBusiness, and then you will see all of our previous programs as well as any other resources that we have gathered around the cannabis industry. Let me once again say thank you to our friends at Plunkett Cooney for sponsoring today's event, as well as other events in the past. We couldn't do it without your support. And I thank you all for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.